Let's go back to the ancient Greek world, and in the beginning of philosophy, like the first 300 years, a lot of the development of philosophy were one guy answering another guy, and then in a sense, philosophies they developed as well. This guy raised a problem, and I disagree with his solution. Here's my take on the problem. Now I have a school of philosophy, and then 100 years later, some new people come along and they say, hang on a second, those guys were wrong. Here's our take on this. And so what is the context that Stoicism enters this, let's say this train of thought of formulating problems and trying to understand life better?
Okay, so let's see how we can do this quickly. The two, Socrates as a philosopher in ancient Greece really got people thinking a lot about what it means to live a virtuous life, what it means to take virtue and the state of your soul or your character as a really serious endeavor, like you really take that seriously and to be virtuous. And he started getting people thinking about, where do we even get these concepts, things like justice and virtue and knowledge? And what he started to realize is we operate with these concepts all the time. We use them, we employ them, we call things just and unjust, but we don't really have much of a secure view about what justice is and what some of other virtues like wisdom or moderation or whatever, courage. And so he started the ball rolling, in effect, for thinking about, where do our concepts come from? What do they refer to in reality? And what virtues should we actually be following and why? And one of his, I wouldn't quite call him a student, but associates, young associates, his name was Plato, he eventually formulated a whole systematic philosophy, which Socrates did not. And it's a very sort of dualistic philosophy. So, I'll say what I mean by that. It's in effect that you've got true reality, what really and fully exists, what's really and fully real, is something separated from the world we see around us with our senses, the tables and chairs and stuff, and including the virtues. What in effect the virtues are is something separate from the world. And you get this dualistic view where man, in effect, each individual is sort of divided into parts. You have this spiritual part, the soul, whose true home is in the other dimension, right? It's very, very, in effect, a little religious. But it's trapped in a body, so it has to cope with, sexual urges and a need for money and food and things like that. And the whole goal is to escape the body and to get the soul in a pure state off alone. Now, there's much, much more to say about Plato's philosophy, but that's a hint in the direction of Stoicism. And then you have Plato's student, Aristotle. And he was very influenced by Plato, but also had a very different worldview. So his view is there is no other dimension. The objects of knowledge are right here in this world. We can come to know them by exercising our sense perception and reasoning and logic and so on. It's the world of science. It's the world of nature. It's the world of science. Life is in this world. Happiness is in this world. Virtue is in this world. And a human being should focus on developing his life and his character so he can get the values he needs and the character he needs to be happy and to flourish. So much more this worldly, whereas Plato's a little more otherworldly, Aristotle's more this worldly. When it comes to Stoicism, I'll say something about Zeno. So Zeno, poor Zeno, he was a wealthy merchant and he was on his way to Athens and he got shipwrecked. He survived it and wound up in Athens and studied philosophy for a time with different people, but he was very influenced by this guy named Crates, who was within the Cynic school of philosophy. And this is where you get into the roots of Stoicism. Because what the Cynics taught was that virtue is the only good. It's the only good. Not life, not love, not a good dinner, not a satisfying career. Virtue is the only good. And vice, moral evil, in effect. Vice is the only bad. And they also taught that virtue is sufficient for happiness. So as long as you've got a virtuous character, you've got your internal character all set, in what they think of as virtuous, that it's sufficient for happiness. It's all you need. Yeah, you could have your leg cut off, but you can still be happy. You can lose everything. You can lose your home, your family. They're killed, like, the story of Job in the Bible, right? God just wrecks the guy's life, and it's like that can happen to you, and you can be happy, according to the Cynics, because all you need is virtue. That's not something Aristotle would have accepted. He explicitly rejected that. But Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, was very much influenced by that. I mean, he made a tweak to this, saying, well, yeah, so virtue is the only thing truly and genuinely good, but there are some things like health, wealth, beauty. They're sort of values, I mean, we naturally prefer these to their opposites, right? So it's sort of okay. It's okay to pursue them, but just don't get attached to them. You don't think they're that important, because in the end, they're really not important. All that's important is your character. So whether you have them or don't have them, whether you live or die, whether you find love or you lose love or never find it, in the end, these things don't matter. And so what it taught people to do was to reorient their way of valuing, to get away from thinking that, I mean, here I am, I just got a new laptop. I love this thing. But I don't think of that as value. Or you can value it, I guess, but don't be attached to it. Don't think it's very important. And if your moral duty requires you to give it up without a thought. If you dump water on it accidentally or something happens to it, don't be upset. Literally, don't be upset. It's irrational to be upset. It's contrary to morality to be upset. Because what have you just done? You've implicitly thought, this is a value. I've suffered a loss. No, you haven't. From their perspective, the only way you can suffer a loss is if you do something immoral. And the only way you can gain, truly, is by improving your character. So there's a real what would you call it? A turn to the inside, a turn toward the internal state of one's character as one sort of inner citadel, where you can, I mean, the sort of the value that they hold out to you, the prospect of life that they hold out to you is you can be virtually invulnerable from suffering. Because your character, they think, though I think contradictorily, but set that aside for a second. Your character, they think, is under your control. The state of your moral character is under your control. Nothing else is. So you have your judgment, and as a result, the state of your character, that's up to you, under your control. Everything else is under the hands of fate, so to speak. Right. And so it's you can orient yourself toward an inner virtue. External things, trying to take care too much about them.
Right. So I have a few questions on that. So when you say that the only thing that is under your control, so according to the Stoic view, the only thing that is under your control